everyone. Welcome to the session on enforcement of foreign arbitral awards in India. I'm Samyukta and I have with me my teammate Aparajita. Collectively, we both will be hosting Somdutta Bhattacharya. To introduce him, he is a managing associate in Argus Partners. His areas of expertise include litigation, commercial litigation, civil litigation, international and domestic arbitration. It's a pleasure to have you here. Over to you, Aparajita, to start the question.
Hi everyone. So the first topic for discussion is what are the foreign awards and how can they be enforced in India?
Hi. Hello, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and discuss this topic with you. So, talking about what are foreign awards, I don't know if I should assume that everybody on the audience has some idea as to what an arbitration is. So, let me just say in a nutshell what an arbitration is first. So, as most of you would know, an arbitration is basically an alternative dispute resolution mechanism where there is a contractual relationship between two parties and they wouldn't want to go to court. What they can do is they can build in something called an arbitration clause in their contract. And if that arbitration clause is there and there's a dispute between them, then instead of going to court, because court system, civil suits, etc., take a lot of time, it's costly. Compared to that, arbitration is a much more streamlined process, so they can go for arbitration straight away. And for that, the contract just needs to have that arbitration clause. And it's much more effective than traditional dispute resolution mechanism. Now, what is a foreign arbitral award? I know a lot of people get confused between international commercial arbitration and foreign arbitrations or foreign arbitral awards. They are not the same thing. So arbitration in India is guided by the Arbitration and Conciliation Act 1996. And Section 2(1)(f) of the Arbitration and Conciliation Act actually defines what is international commercial arbitration. And it basically says that any arbitration between two parties where at least one of the parties is a foreign national or a foreign company or a foreign government is an international commercial arbitration. However, that is not equivalent to that being a foreign arbitration. So in arbitration, there's a concept of seat. Seat is basically the place of the jurisdiction whose law applies to the arbitration. So today there might be a foreign party and an Indian party, but the seat of the arbitration may be India. So that is a international commercial arbitration because there is a foreign party. But it is not a foreign arbitration. For it to be a foreign award or a foreign arbitration, the seat has to be outside India. So it is permissible for two Indian parties also to choose to have a seat outside India. In fact, I have myself participated in an arbitration where the seat was Singapore, but both the parties were actually Indian parties. But the curial law, the law of the seat, was that of Singapore. So that is a foreign arbitration. Now, to specify that a bit further, Part 2 of the Arbitration Conciliation Act 1996 talks about how foreign arbitrations or foreign arbitral awards are to be enforced and when they can be refused, etc. We'll go deeper into that, of course. But it is to be remembered that not every jurisdiction is recognized as a foreign jurisdiction in India whose arbitral awards can be enforced in India. So there are two conventions to which India is a signatory. One is the New York Convention and one is the Geneva Convention. So a country has to be either a signatory to the Geneva Convention or the New York Convention, and it has to be recognized through publication in the official gazette as a convention territory by India. And if the foreign award is made under the law of one of these countries, which are actually signatories to either of these two conventions and recognized by India as a convention territory, then only the award can be a foreign award which is capable of enforcement or recognition in India under Part 2 of the Act. As far as I am aware, there are right now 54 convention countries which are recognized by India. I think the last entrant was South Korea sometime in April 2020, because India now has a lot of trade with South Korea. So that is in a nutshell, what foreign arbitral awards are.
Okay, sir. So the next topic is, can foreign awards be enforced straight away in India or the award holder has to wait for legal challenges to the award in the country of the state prior to its execution?
So, if you're aware of domestic arbitrations, in domestic arbitrations, when you get an award, you cannot straight away go and file for enforcement or execution under Section 36. You have to wait for a period of 90 days. So, within this 90-day period, if you have suffered an arbitral award, what we call the award debtor, so there's an award holder who has got the award in his favor, and the award debtor, much like a judgment debtor and decree holder. So basically, if today you are an award debtor, you can go and challenge the arbitral award under Section 34 of the Act if it's a domestic arbitration. And there's a period of 90 days, which is there. And only after this 90-day period has expired, can you go and file for enforcement of the arbitral award under Section 36. Earlier, if somebody filed an application under Section 34, and challenge the arbitral award, there would be an automatic stay of enforcement. However, after the 2015 amendment to the Act, there has been a change to that. So now execution proceedings and challenge or an appeal or an application to set aside the award can go on side by side. Now, when it comes to foreign awards, there is no such period specified per se in the Act. But if you look at Section 48(3) of the Act, I think, it says that if an application for the setting aside or suspension of the award has been made to a competent authority referred to in clause E of subsection 1, the court may, if it considers it proper, adjourn the decision on the enforcement of the award and may also, on the application of the party claiming enforcement of the award, order the other party to give suitable security. So basically, if today, let's say the foreign award is an award made in the UK, or the law of the award, the curial law is that of UK. And the UK law says that there is a particular period within which an arbitral award can be challenged. Indian courts have to see if the award has been challenged in the UK. UK is just an example here. If it has been challenged in the UK within this time. If it has been challenged, then you have to go into the UK law to see whether it has that automatic stay procedure. So like the earlier Arbitration Act, if it contemplates that upon challenging an award, there's an automatic stay, then the Indian court can't go and straight away execute it. Or a UK court or any other convention territory court has today given a suspension or a stay on the enforcement of the award. The Indian courts cannot today go and straight away enforce it. So the challenge procedure or the appeal procedure in the curial law country, where the seat of the arbitration is, has to be exhausted first, and then only can it be enforced in India.
Okay, sir. Thank you for that. How and when can enforcement of foreign award be refused in India?
So when can enforcement of foreign award be refused in India has gone quite a sea change, in terms of how the law has panned out on that one. So there's an interesting story here. There was this matter called, there was an arbitration between this Australian company called White Industries and Coal India. Of course, all of you know Coal India, it practically has a monopoly in coal mining in India, which is now changing under the present government, but leaving that aside. So there was an arbitration between this Australian company, White Industries, and Coal India. And White Industries got the award in its favor, and it came to India because Coal India's assets are in India and wanted to enforce the award or execute the award in India. Now, we are all lawyers. We know how to delay matters, especially Indian lawyers, right? So I think Coal India's lawyers really took White Industries for a toss, and it was 10, 11 years, and the award wasn't executed, and it was still pending, setting aside and challenge in the Supreme Court, etc., etc. So this White Industries got very frustrated, and they this time they went in an UN Central arbitration against the government of India itself, against the territory of India itself, saying that this inordinate delay in the Indian judicial system is today a violation of the most favored nation status that Australia has been given under the India-Australia bilateral investment treaty. So this was its contention. Now, In that case, the arbitral tribunal in that arbitration between White Industries and the Republic of India held that no, India or the government of India cannot be held responsible for you not being able to enforce the award, etc., or for Coal India not paying your money. So there is no vicarious liability per se. But very importantly, the arbitral tribunal actually did award a cost of $4 million against the government of India, saying that this inordinate delay in your justice system is indeed a violation of Australia and Australian entities' recognition as a most favored nation status under the India-Australia BIT. So this actually shook up our lawmakers a bit, that this was not a good thing, because today India is a expanding economy and we are trying to attract foreign investors and we are trying to call investors and invest in India. But today, if they don't have any enforcement mechanism in India and there are delays of 10, 12, 11 years, it doesn't show India in a very good light. So White Industries was a major factor behind the 2015 amendment to Section 48 of the Act specifically, which talks about when which question you asked me, when enforcement of foreign award can be refused. So I told you this story because you have to understand that today under Section 48, the scope of refusing enforcement of a foreign award has become very, very, very narrow post the amendment to Section 48 under the 2015 Act, as well as certain judgments which I'll discuss in this regard. So if you look at Section 48, if we just glance at it, so Section 48(1) has remained virtually unchanged. Talks about, I think, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 situations when enforcement of foreign award can be refused. 5 conditions under Section 48(1), which is parties were under some incapacity or, there was no audio alterum partem, the award debtor could not present his case, or award contains decisions on subjects which are beyond the scope of the arbitration, or composition of the arbitral tribunal is not in accordance with the arbitration agreement. The vanilla clauses for refusing an award in general. Now, what is more important is Section 48(2). Now, 48(2), as it stood before the amendment, simply said that So 48(2) says enforcement of an arbitral award may also be refused if the court finds that the subject matter of the difference is not capable of settlement by arbitration under the law of India, or the enforcement of the award would be contrary to public policy of India. Now, this public policy is really where you can open up a can of worms, because public policy, the entire definition of public policy and arbitration in the context of arbitration has undergone a sea change in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Now, if you today look at the explanation to Section 48(2), it's a much wider explanation. So before the 2015 amendment, the explanation to Section 48(2), and 48(2) talks about basically public policy, the explanation was, it is hereby declared for the avoidance of any doubt, the award is in conflict with the public policy of India if the making of the award was induced or affected by fraud or corruption, without prejudice to the generality of Clause B. So it kept open Clause B or public policy wide and general to a very large extent. And so parties, award debtors, Indian parties, who were suffering foreign awards in India, were taking rampant advantage of Section 48(2)(b) public policy and saying this is against the public policy of India, that is against the public policy of India. So this changed after the 2015 amendment, and now the new explanation reads, for the avoidance of any doubt, it is clarified that an award is in conflict with the public policy of India only if the making of the award was induced or affected by fraud or corruption, or was in violation of Section 75 or Section 81. It is in contravention with the fundamental policy of Indian law. It is in conflict with the most basic notions of morality and justice. And there's another explanation which has been added. For the avoidance of doubt, the test as to whether there is a contravention with the fundamental policy of Indian law shall not entail a review on the merits of the dispute. This is very important. So both under Section 34, which is basically setting aside of domestic arbitral awards, and under Section 48, which deals with setting aside of foreign arbitral awards. This explanation or this particular clause that says in no case will you go into the merits of the dispute again, because the merits of the dispute has already been decided upon by the arbitrator. Today, as a court, as a judiciary, you can either enforce the award, you can not enforce the award. A domestic, what is also to be noted in Section 48, a foreign award cannot be set aside by an Indian court. A domestic award can be set aside under Section 34 by an Indian court. But under Section 48, a foreign award cannot be set aside. Simply, enforcement can be refused in very, very, very select few narrow cases. But it cannot be set aside. Now, if we travel a little bit further into Section 48 too, because that is where I think the crux of the entire dispute regarding enforcement of foreign awards in India lies, is 48(2)(a), which talks about the subject matter of the reference is not capable of settlement by arbitration under the law of India. So, what are the subjects which are not capable of settlement by arbitration under the law of India? So, there are two cases in India which talks about what are two very important cases. Of course, there are other cases, two Supreme Court cases which talk about what are the subjects which cannot be settled by arbitration in India, or where arbitration cannot be an effective dispute resolution mechanism. So there's the case of Booz Allen Hamilton versus SBI Home Finance, which is a 2011 case. And there's a case of A. Ayasamy versus A. Paramasivam, which clarified Booz Allen to a certain extent regarding whether fraud is arbitrable or not, etc., which we won't go into in this webinar because it will become too technical then. So, generally speaking, from Booz Allen Hamilton and Ayasamy, few subjects which are not capable of settlement by arbitration in India are criminal offenses, matrimonial disputes, guardianship, insolvency, winding up, testamentary matters, eviction matters, tenancy matters, mortgage, trusts, patents, trademarks, copyrights, antitrust, competition, bribery, etc. So this is not an exhaustive list, but this is more or less a general list of subjects which are not capable of settlement by arbitration in India. So if today the foreign award concerns any of these topics or any of these subjects, it cannot be enforced in India under Section 48(2)(1). Now, under 48(2)(a), and under 48(2)(b), which is, as I said, the can of worms of public policy. Now, what is the contravention of public policy of India? Now, those of you in maybe your 4th or 5th years who have read arbitration in college would have definitely come across the very famous case of Renu Sagar. So Renu Sagar it's an old case, 1994 case, but it has really, really stood the test of time, to the extent that when the 2015 amendment has been brought in and this explanation that I read out was brought in, it's practically a reiteration of what Renu Sagar said. Renu Sagar said public policy, any award cannot be enforced on the ground of public policy only in 3 conditions. The 3 conditions are, it has to be contrary to fundamental policy of Indian law. And fundamental policy of Indian law doesn't mean, you pick up one statute or one section or one provision from Indian law. So Renu Sagar says that it is not merely contrary to a statute, but it is contrary to the fundamental policy of Indian law itself. Or it violates the interests of India, or it is against the most basic notions of justice and morality. So today, if you look at the new explanation to Section 48(2)(b), this is virtually a reiteration of Renu Sagar. And Renu Sagar has been adopted with approval in a lot of matters in Sri Lal Mahal versus Progetto Grano, which is a 2014 case. Then there are other High Court matters. Let us not go into that right now. Another important case, which also necessitated, or which definitely had a part to play in the 2015 amendment to the Arbitration Act, was that of the Supreme Court judgment, 2014 Supreme Court judgment in ONGC versus Western Gecko. Now, I don't know if you are familiar with the Wednesbury principle. it basically, Wednesbury principle is a test of reasonableness. So basically, it says that if a reasonable man with reasonable foresight would not have done something, then such act, if it violates such reasonableness, or an award that violates such reasonableness, cannot be enforced in India. Now, this was what was said by the Supreme Court in 2014 in Western Gecko. So, in enforcement of foreign awards also, they built in this Wednesbury principle or Wednesbury test. Now, through the 2015 amendment, and by narrowing down the scope of enforcement of refusal of enforcement of foreign awards of India, that Wednesbury principle has also been set aside. In fact, I had the occasion of attending a webinar by Justice Indu Malhotra of the Supreme Court, where she was discussing this matter, and she was also of the opinion that it is indeed an erroneous judgment. And now we have gone past Western Gecko through our recent amendment to the 2015 Act. So basically, what I'm trying to say here is that through these changes, through these changes to the Arbitration Act in 2015 and now again in 2019, I know maybe we are not being able to completely build an ironclad Arbitration Act where nobody can take advantage of the court system after they have lost an arbitration. But definitely we have progressed. We have progressed a lot, and that's because India wants to see itself go up in the ease of doing business rankings, and for that, foreign arbitrations and enforcement of foreign awards is a big factor. So I think we are on the right path to that. In fact, I'd like to talk about another recent matter, February 2020 judgment of Vijay Karya versus Prysmian Kavi System, which is an Italian company. So there, the Bombay High Court had said a foreign award is not reasonable or not enforceable because the Bombay High Court felt that the contract had not been interpreted properly by the arbitrator. Now, the Supreme Court set aside that Bombay High Court judgment. It said that the award is to be enforced in India. And this part of the order, I'd just like to read out to see how we have progressed from the white industries days. So the Supreme Court says the important point to be considered is that the foreign award must be read as a whole, fairly, and without nitpicking. If read as a whole, the said award has addressed the basic issues raised by the parties and has in substance decided the claims and counterclaims of the parties. Enforcement must follow. So I think this is a very, very important and progressive step which has been taken by the legislature as well as the Supreme Court. Unfortunately, in April 2020, another judgment came out which has caused some controversy in this regard, and a lot of lawyers I know feel that this has again taken us a step back from the gains we had made through these amendments and through these judgments. I'm talking about the April 2020 judgment of NAFED versus Alimenta, where NAFED is a government company or a government organization which is concerned with the export of food grains outside India. Now, in the 1980s, to export food grains outside India, you would require the permission of the government. A license was required. And Alimenta was a Spanish company which had entered into a contract with NAFED for export of certain food grains. Now, because there was a cyclone and the requisite quantity of food grains was not available, NAFED was not able to export. And Alimenta said, you are in breach of your contract, you have to export. So they applied to the Indian government asking for permission to export more food grain outside of India to this company. And the Indian government said, nothing doing. There's a food shortage in the country. You are not going to. So I think the 5,000 metric tons was the contracted for quantity, and they were not able to export more than 1,900 metric tons. So there was an arbitration, and there was again this long drawn enforcement procedure, appeal procedure, etc. Finally, it came to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court finally decided it in April 2020, and it refused enforcement. It said, today, if the Indian government is stopping a company from exporting food grains outside India, its hands are tied. If it tried to abide by the contract and it actually exported the food grains, it would have been directly contravening a government order, and it cannot do that, being a government organization, being a government company, and I cannot enforce it. Now, I know a lot of people feel that this has taken us a step back, or this has not been a good judgment, etc. I personally tend to disagree. I think this is a very, very fact-specific case and a very, very fact-specific judgment that has been given by the Supreme Court. If today really there's a food shortage in the country, and you being a government company concerned with the distribution of food grains, you cannot today go ahead and you export food grains outside the country, contravening a government order, and that according to me would actually be against the interests of India itself. So I think this is a very fact specific case. I do not think that it has taken us back really, or it's anywhere close to the white industries fiasco. I think we are on a progressive path regarding enforcement of foreign awards in India, or as far as setting up boundaries for refusal to enforce foreign awards in India.
Sir, I have two follow-up questions to
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
So the first one, what are the factors or what are the considerations the court has to take while enforcing the award as to the, as you said, there need to be some assets of the judgment debtor in the particular country. So what other factors does the court have to consider while, taking an application for enforcement?
No, so basically, today, if you look at part 2 of the Act, the court has two assets. Obviously, that is part of, I think, Section 47, which says that, which is the appropriate court, and you will obviously go to the appropriate court under whose jurisdiction the assets are located, because otherwise you can't enforce. So an arbitral award, I should have said this at the beginning, an arbitral award either under a domestic arbitral award or a foreign arbitral award is enforced in India as a decree of the court. Now, for a decree to be enforced under the CPC, you go to the court in whose jurisdiction the assets lie. But under Section 47, if you look at the explanation to Section 47, which is again a 2015 explanation, normally you could go for enforcement of a domestic award, you could go to a court of principal civil original jurisdiction, principal civil court having original jurisdiction, or any court where the assets lie. But for a foreign award, you would have to go to the High Court of the state. Post the 2015 amendment, it talks. The explanation clearly specifies that the court has to be the High Court of the state. So you file your enforcement application before the High Court, where the Indian party, the state where the Indian party is located. In that High Court, you go and file the enforcement, and then the High Court, for obviously, if the assets are directly not under the jurisdiction of the High Court can always what we call subpoena it to a lower court to actually take control of the assets, etc. That's a different procedure. As for what other considerations are to be taken by the court, really, the court cannot go into the merits of the dispute. That is the first and foremost thing. The court cannot see whether the arbitrator is right or wrong in interpretation of the contract, application of the law, any of that. So the scope of judicial interference in an arbitral award, in a foreign arbitral award especially, is very, very, very limited. Only and only if, as I said, the award cannot be set aside, only and only if any of the conditions under Section 48(1), which are the 5 conditions I said, or 48(2), which is that not capable of settlement by arbitration in India, or contravention of public policy, which is basically fundamental policy of Indian law, or against the most basic notions of morality, justice, etc. Only then it can be refused. Otherwise, an Indian court is absolutely bound to enforce the contract.
Okay, sir. So the other questions I think you've already answered, but just to repeat it, is there any particular difference between Section 34 and 48 when it comes to enforcement? Are there more conditions under 34?
So 34 has also undergone quite a bit of change. So if you look at 34 once, it has also undergone quite a bit of change, and it has become much narrower than what it used to be. But I would say 34 is still a little wider compared to, so if you look at Section 34 2A, it talks about the 5 conditions that are there, which is also pari materia to 48.1. And then 34.2b, which talks about if the court finds that it is not capable of settlement by reference under arbitration and is in conflict with the public policy of India. So it reads pretty similar, 34 as well as 48, especially in 48.1 compared to 34.1, 34.2, and 48.2 compared to 34.2b. They read pretty similar, and I'd say read pari materia to each other. So not so much difference per se in the wording of the provisions or the language of the provisions. But if you look today at the judgments or how the judgments have evolved, now there's this recent judgment of SsangYong of Justice Nariman, where he talks about what are the situation. What again he discusses in great detail as to what is public. It's very well worded judgment, public policy and fundamental policy, and he refers to his earlier judgment in DDA versus Kailash, I think. So he talks about how narrow it has become, the scope of fundamental policy, public policy, etc., etc. But something in SsangYong which attracted my attention was where Justice Nariman says that if the party can show, and SsangYong is in context of enforcement of domestic award. So Justice Nariman says if a party can show that vital evidence has not been taken into account, then enforcement can still be refused under Section 34. But I would say foreign awards are even stricter. This little gap that is there in SsangYong, in 34, vital evidence, etc. Even that gap is not there in Section 48. Courts are absolutely not supposed to go into this question of evidence, whether vital evidence has been considered, not considered, etc., etc. Just have to stick to the language of Section 48.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much.
So moving on to the next question. What is the fundamental policy of Indian law and how is it to be determined whether an award violates the same or not?
So I think I've already answered this, that what is fundamental policy of Indian law is basically it has to be against the most basic notions of morality and justice, and it has to be against the very, a founding principle of the Indian legal system itself. It cannot be, just because it is not complying with the statute or, the arbitral award is based on some law of some country which is directly maybe not applicable in India, or where the law is different in India. All these factors do not matter. Even if the award is in violation of some statutory principle, some legal principle, it does not matter. It is much narrower than that. And as Vijay Kadia versus Prismian says, the Supreme Court says in Vijay Kadia that it is, it must be read as a whole fairly and without nitpicking. This is very important, without nitpicking. If read as a whole, the said award has addressed the basic issues raised by the parties and has decided the claims and the counterclaims. Enforcement must follow. So basically, unless it is it shocks the conscience of the court, as we like to say as law students, it has to be enforced.
So this might be a slight deviation from the topic, but there's a follow-up question. I'll just take it now itself.
Yes.
Can you explain the patent illegality as a ground for refusal of enforcement of fundamental policy?
So patent illegality, this is again important. And I thank whoever raised this question, because patent illegality is a ground for not enforcing a domestic arbitral award under Section 34. But as far as foreign arbitral awards are concerned, this ground of patent illegality is not available. So a patently illegal award would be, as again, I would refer to the judgment of Justice Nariman in SsangYong, because he deals there with patent illegality very well. And but again, you have to remember that's for domestic awards, and it says what is patently illegal is where the award goes against, so a domestic award cannot go against Indian law or an Indian statute or an Indian provision of law or an Indian legal custom, etc. That would be patently illegal. But as far as a foreign arbitral award is concerned, this patent illegality ground is not available. So when we were talking about evidence, so even though the Evidence Act is not applicable to arbitrations, evidence or overlooking vital evidence is something that is still a ground under patent illegality, as Justice Nariman puts it in Sanya. So if a party has not, or the arbitrator has not looked at vital evidence that has been put forward by a party, that award would be patently illegal. But I would say that ground of patent illegality will not be available in case of enforcement of foreign awards.
Okay, sir. Thank you. Thank you for that. I'll move on to the next question. What is the appropriate code for enforcement of a foreign award, and what are the appeal procedures?
So, as I said earlier, so Section 2(1)(e) of the Arbitration Act talks about what is a court, and it says that a principal civil court having original jurisdiction, as if the subject matter of the arbitration was the subject matter of the suit, would be a court. Now, that is still the case for Part 1 of the Act. But for enforcement, as I said, post the 2015 amendment, it's been made clear by the amendment to Section 47 that you have to approach the High Court first. You have to file your application for enforcement of the award before the High Court. And under Section 47, if you see, the party applying for the enforcement of a foreign award shall, at the time of the application, produce before the court a few things which are mentioned: original award or copy thereof, original agreement for arbitration, and such evidence as may be necessary to prove that the award is a foreign award. Now, there's an interesting case of pretty recent case, I think PEC Limited versus Ostbulk Shipping. This is a 2019 case, which expands this further. And again, this shows the pro-arbitration mentality of the Indian courts right now. It says that the shall in Section 47 should be read as may. So basically, these compliances that is there in Section 47(1) of producing original award or original agreement, etc., it can be read as may, but only to a certain extent. So at the time of filing of the enforcement application, you don't have to produce the original award or original agreement, etc. At a later stage, you have to. But at the initial stage, you can also file it without these compliance documents. And the High Court, as I said, would be the appropriate court to file the enforcement application. As for appeal, so if you look at Section 50, it says that there can be only one appeal from this enforcement application, and there will be no second appeal. But of course, there's an exception, like there always is in most Indian law provisions. So the exception is that you can still approach the Supreme Court. So even if there is no second appeal provision, you can still approach the Supreme Court for from a decision which has refused to set us to enforce your foreign award.
Okay, sir. Does a foreign award need to be stamped and registered to be enforced?
No, it does not. I would refer you to the case of Shriram EPC versus Rio Glass Solar, in which the Supreme Court has categorically said that stamping is not required. Stamping is not required for a foreign award to be enforced. And there is a Delhi High Court judgment, which I think this Naval Gent Maritime, and it has been followed up in subsequent Supreme Court judgments also, that registration of a foreign award is also not necessary, and it can be enforced as a baby.
Okay, sir. Thank you for that. So the next question is, what would the limitation period be for enforcement of foreign awards in India?
Well, this is a bit of a fraught question right now, because so initially there was this judgment called Fuers de Lawson versus Jindal Exports, which says that a foreign award comes as a decree itself capable of enforcement. So if you look at the Limitation Act and the schedule to the Limitation Act, it provides what are the limitation periods for different causes of action. So for enforcement of a decree, Fuers de Lawson said that Section 136 of the of the Limitation Act, the Schedule to the Limitation Act, Article 136, Article 136 of the Schedule to the Limitation Act is applicable, and that would be 12 years from the date of the decree. Now, there's a recent judgment which has caused a confusion of March 2020 of Bank of Baroda versus Kotak Mahindra Bank, which says that for foreign decrees to be enforced, now understand the difference, for foreign decrees, not for foreign awards, decrees made by foreign courts, Article 136 will not apply, Article 137 would apply. Now, Article 137 is a residuary provision, which says that when no other limitation period has been given for a cause of action, it shall be 3 years. Now, why this confusion? Since a foreign award is to be enforced as a decree in India, there's a school of thought which is now saying that for this judgment of the Supreme Court, foreign awards should also have a shorter limitation period, since they are enforceable as decrees, and they should also have a 3-year limitation period. However, I do not agree with this, because that judgment of Bank of Baroda versus Kotak Mahindra Bank is based largely on Section 44A of the CPC, which talks about enforcement of foreign decrees. And in the explanation to that section, it says that for this section, decrees are only decrees passed by court and not any award or any other decision, order, etc., even if the same is enforceable as a decree. So I think that exception clause is very important. So when the Supreme Court is talking about enforcement of foreign decrees under Article 137 in Bank of Baroda versus Kotak Mahindra Bank, that exception to Section 44A cannot be overlooked. And I still think Fierce de Lawson, which is a 2001 judgment, which says that Article 136 would apply, which would be the 12-year period. I think that would be still the correct law, but of course I will stand corrected if any subsequent judgment comes from the Supreme Court absolutely clarifying the issue.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So, sir, the next question is: do you think India is a foreign award-friendly jurisdiction?
It wasn't initially. I think it has over the last few years. Because of all these changes, the 2015 amendment, the 2019 amendment, all these judgments that we discussed. So I think these are obviously pointing towards the positive trend, and it's very, very important that we do so, because as I said, our ease of doing business, rankings, etc. are all dependent on this. But as in a large part, this also has to play a large part in that, the host of other factors also. But yeah, definitely we have become a more foreign award-friendly jurisdiction. Whether Alimenta, the one I discussed regarding that, export of agricultural food stock outside India, whether that is a step back or not, or how foreign investors view that, whether it's a step back or not, time will say. But again, I think it's a fact-specific judgment, and the overall trend is towards becoming a more foreign award-friendly.
Okay, sir. So another follow-up question to that is, will the 2019 Amendment Act make India more foreign award friendly, or does it help, make the situation better in any way?
2019 amendment is more concerned with, overhauling the entire domestic arbitration system in India. So earlier, under the 2015 amendment, or before the 2019 amendment, we could go to a court under Section 11 and we could ask for appointment of arbitrators if the other party wasn't agreeing to appointment of arbitration, or arbitrator, or wasn't agreeing to an arbitration. So now that entire system is proposed to be overhauled. Domestic arbitrations are now sought to be made more institutionalized. There is supposed to be an arbitration council of India. So, you're appointing retired judges and whoever you want is supposed to stop. So we are supposed to have arbitral panels which are to be maintained with the Arbitration Council of India, and there's supposed to be designated arbitration institutions. Not been enforced yet, but it will be. So it's more concerned with overhauling the entire domestic arbitration system. I think the 2015 amendment itself has made foreign awards or narrowed or streamlined the enforcement of foreign awards in India quite a bit. I wouldn't say the 2019 amendment has that much of an impact on enforcement.
Okay, sir. Thank you for that. Samita, can we take the questions now?
Yes, sir. So thank you for such an insightful session. I
Thank you very much.
know you made the scope of questions in itself very narrow. I think there are, so I'll take them. Does Part 1 of the Arbitration Act apply to foreign awards and foreign arbitration? If not, why? If yes, also why? No, also why?
No, part one does not have any application to enforcement of foreign awards. In fact, part one has very little application to international commercial arbitration also. But there are a few provisions which are still applicable to, I think, Section 9. You can still go and ask for interim security in an international commercial arbitration under Section 9 of the Act. So, Section 27, there are a few sections which are applicable to international commercial arbitration under Part 1 of the Act. But foreign awards, there is absolutely no impact on foreign awards.
Okay, sir. And Murtaza has a question. Could you
Yes.
shed some light upon the provision that the SE struck down?
Sorry?
On the provision that the Supreme Court struck down in the Act.
I'm sorry, I was unable to follow you.
Could you shed some light upon the
Yes.
provision that the Supreme Court struck down? It's not mentioned that provision.
Which I think you have to specify which exact provision. I don't think the Supreme Court has per se struck down any provision. I think the question is a bit misguided.
Okay, I'll
The Sup-
next question then because he is not there right now and we can't ask him to clarify either. Can you explain about the doctrine of Westness-Gatto?
I think that's Wednesbury principle.
I think. I think that he was talking about Western Gecko. Yeah. So the Western Gecko judgment. So Wednesbury principle is a very well-known principle of common law. So Wednesbury principle basically it's a principle of reasonableness. What a reasonable man would do, what a reasonable man wouldn't do. It comes from torts really, and its origins are in common law, that a reasonable man would have enough foresight to do certain things and would have enough foresight to not do certain things. So if these things are done by a person having, all his senses intact, and which he's not supposed to do, he's supposed to be penalized for it. Similarly, for an award to be in contravention of the Wednesbury principle, if today the court held or finds that the arbitrator has gone beyond the realm of reason, that maybe the evidence and the contract and everything points to an award which should have gone one way reasonably, according to a reasonable man, but it has gone another way. That could be said to be in violation of the Wednesbury principle. So it's the test of reasonableness. But that now has also been narrowed. It hasn't been struck down, but it is not applicable to enforcement of foreign awards anymore. So the test of reasonableness, whether the arbitrator has passed the award reasonably, whether he has applied the contract correctly, whether he has applied the law correctly, etc., etc. These are not things which the court is supposed to look into.
Okay.
It is to be assumed that the arbitrator is a reasonable. That's about it.
Okay. Thank you for that, sir. So the next question is, does India have to abide by the foreign award that is passed?
India, I didn't get the question.
Sir,
Does India have to abide by the foreign award?
Yes, sir.
If there is no reason to set it aside, I don't know if he's talking about bilateral treaty agreements, maybe, where India itself would be a party to a bilateral treaty agreement with a foreign investor or a foreign nation. Yes, in those cases, in bilateral treaty agreements, the proper mechanism for mostly they would have unsettled arbitration clauses where the UN arbitration body and India would have to abide by those awards. If there is absolutely no reason to set aside the award, those awards have to be abided by. They have to be enforced in the same mechanism as contemplated under Part 2 of the Act.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. Samyukta, are there any more questions?
So not really, but is there any time limit for the enforcement of law? I had a particular question about this.
So, as we discussed, whether there's a time limit, as in whether there's a limitation period for a party to go and file for enforcement, yes. Whether it's 12 years or 3 years, as we discussed, there's a debate regarding that. According to me, it's 12 years. According to some people, now it's 3 years. Whether there's a outer time limit for an Indian court to actually enforce it, no, not statutorily. But as far as foreign awards are concerned, Indian courts are now trying to be more proactive and trying to enforce it because the law has also become much narrower and streamlined. We hope to obviously reduce these massive timelines that we have seen in the White Industries case and enforce foreign awards quicker.
Thank you, sir. Prajita,
Okay.
I conclude the session.
Yeah. If anyone, I think we have another question. Okay, so
Yes.
the next question is, can you please differentiate the seat, the venue, and the place of arbitration, and whether the parties have a choice in it?
Yes. So basically, seat is where the jurisdiction of whose law applies to the arbitration. So today, if the seat of an arbitration is Singapore, the venue of the arbitration can still be Mumbai. The law of Singapore would be the curial law, and it would still be a foreign award, even though the venue is in India. Place of arbitration really is a very loose term now to use because place and venue are mostly the same thing. I would also like to, whoever's raised this question, I would also like to refer them to the important judgment of the Supreme Court, quite landmark judgment right now, of Indus versus Datawind, where the Supreme Court talks about whether parties can have exclusive jurisdiction or choose exclusive jurisdiction with regard to the place of arbitration. Yes, absolutely. You have to understand that arbitration is completely a contract-driven thing, and there was some confusion as to the fact whether parties should have the autonomy to choose a place of arbitration or choose a seat of arbitration, where the arbitration would not, where it would have absolutely no nexus to the place of arbitration. So today, if you look at section 20 of the CPC, it talks about when jurisdiction can fall at a certain place, where the defendant resides, where the cause of action arises, or part of the cause of action arises, etc., etc. But today, if absolutely there is no semblance of cause of action arising or any party residing today, let's say in Mumbai, can I today choose that the place of arbitration will be Mumbai and the courts of Mumbai would have exclusive jurisdiction? There was some confusion regarding this because normally where the dispute has no nexus with the place wouldn't have jurisdiction. But in this judgment of Indus versus Datawind, I see somebody's asked for the name of the judgment. It's Indus versus Datawind, Indus Mobile versus Datawind something. So you just Google Indus versus Datawind, you will get it. So it has said today that since there's a complete party autonomy in arbitration, parties are definitely absolutely free to have an exclusive jurisdiction. They're free to choose seat, they're free to choose the venue, and there's nothing stopping them. And whatever they have chosen, they have to abide by.
Are
Thank
there
you.
any more questions?
No, Prajita, I think we can conclude the session.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much for this great session. I think we all could learn a lot from this.
Thank you.
And if, sir, if you could leave your email ID, if the students have any
Sure.
more questions, they
I'll
can email
just
them.
type it into the chat box. So if any of you have any questions regarding arbitration or generally life after law, whatever, just to drop me a mail. So here it is. Okay.
Thank you so much, sir.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you.